even in the most educated, most privileged segment of us, right, we still don't know parenting. It might actually not be a bad idea to have a child later in life because financially you're more secure. You can afford the care you need. I use this term dhimi aach, right, which is that don't put your career out. To get back into the groove of things is tough. I've seen enough and more women struggle with it.
Do you think the educational institutions are making enough changes in their way of teaching children?
The very fact that we're still sitting in classrooms means that a lot needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Indian women actually work the hardest in the world, number of hours in the world, and at home. It's unfair when we say, oh, women are great at multitasking. You know what? They shouldn't be.
So, how do you manage it all? If mompreneurs were given a penny for the number of times this question is thrown at them, at this dinner table or that business summit, we, the women, could make an entire living out of it. And yet, we take it in our strides and answer it with a big, humble smile on our faces. It is to celebrate these smiles that make up a mompreneur's journey worth it that we bring to you on Maatehood with Priyanka Raina. Today, we are here to celebrate and speak to someone who's a living testament of a self-made woman. She is the founder of BabyChakra, the co-founder of the Good Glam group, a Harvard Business School graduate, but the highest badge on her uniform is Baby A's mom. She is Naiyya Saggi. Hi Naiyya, welcome to Maatehood. It's such a pleasure having you here finally, and I have been wanting to really meet you and have this chat with you. So I'm really, really glad that we have you here today.
Thank you. The pleasure is absolutely all mine.
So first of all, congratulations on the second one. How old is she?
So she's 3 months, like I was telling you offline as well. I mean, we feel that she's just turning human.
Aww.
She's giving us smiles in the morning.
Yeah.
So, Sandeep and I now are finally like, okay, maybe this is all worth it. But it's been quite a journey. It's been quite a lovely journey.
I'm sure. I think it's just such a beautiful phase of life, right? When they're such little babies and their smile, their cuddles, everything is just worth it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I really want to talk about today. Being a mom, a wife, an entrepreneur, handling your business, like so many things we women in today's time are trying to juggle constantly. So it's like two completely different things, motherhood and entrepreneurship. How has it been for you?
Honestly, I have been a big believer in doing what comes authentically to me.
Yeah.
Right. And I've known the side of me that's been an entrepreneur longer than I've known the side of me that has been a mother. Mm-hmm. Right. So actually, entrepreneurship comes very naturally to me today. Right. It is what I do. It is like a muscle that has been honed now for the last 10 years. Yeah. Motherhood is a new muscle, relatively, right? It's 5.5 years old as a muscle, and that's my older child I'm talking about. So it's interesting you asked me this, because when I think about it, it's not something I've had to juggle. Mm-hmm. It's something that is pretty much going on parallel tracks at any given point in time.
Yes.
And that's how I lead my life.
Yeah. No, I can totally relate with that. I also have 2 babies and a brand to run and so many other things which are constantly happening. And I think eventually you become doing everything so swiftly and naturally, and that just becomes part of your life.
Yeah.
But now you are a mother of 3. And what's been most difficult, like delivering the human babies or the entrepreneurial baby?
It's again very interesting you asked this, right, Priyanka?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. My first company, BabyChakra, right, was and felt like a baby. Mm-hmm. I was extremely passionate about it, and every product launch and I talk about digital products in the BabyChakra example, and then the physical products, right? But every sort of marketing campaign and every social media ad, right? It felt like it was an extension of me. In my second stint as an entrepreneur with the Glam group, right? And that's playing at a very different scale now. Yeah. I don't think of the company as my baby at all. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. Mm-hmm. And I don't think of BabyChakra as my baby at all as well, right?
Yeah.
I actually think of it like just almost like an autonomous being that needs constant like oversight, some nurturing at time, but it's not owned by me. It's actually owned by a lot of people. Yeah. And a lot of people actually creating this paradigm and creating this thing, this being, right? While of course in parenting, it's different. I don't expect Arya and Raya to never not be my babies,
Yes,
right? They will
yes.
always be my children.
Yes.
They will grow up to be autonomous beings, hopefully.
Yes.
Fairly soon again, hopefully. But, when they do, and I will be proud of them when they do.
Absolutely.
I think it'll always be like this whole sort of care bond, this bond of
Yeah,
nurturing.
yeah.
That will not cease.
Yes.
So I think it's interesting that, we draw the parallels, and I've seen sort of this, play out across two ventures now, which is why like I've also kind of been introspecting on this, I think,
Absolutely.
evolution.
And I think that is when it becomes very rewarding for you, because you have given birth to this baby, you nurtured it, and then you see them becoming independent and responsible. And that has happened with your companies now. They are moreover on an autopilot mode, in the sense like you have raised them so well that they are self-sufficient now. And I think that must be very rewarding
No,
for you.
I won't be as presumptuous as say that they're in autopilot mode at all. And I think, companies always need work
Yes.
every day, right?
Yes.
And every day is different. You know this so well, right? At any stage. I think it's more about saying that there are people in
Yeah.
the ecosystem who know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, where we come in is where we need to, first of all, trust them.
True.
Right, with that process, and then we need to help, and we need to then pull up our sleeves and build
Yeah.
in different situations and
Yeah.
different times, right?
Yeah.
Many examples to share, but I think that's the broader construct. But certainly not an autopilot, I can tell you that.
No, you always have to kind of be involved, of course. It's not like you can just let it go. But I'm very curious to know how your journey has been, in the sense how it
Yeah.
all started. You always wanted to do this, and how the idea of both the ventures came up.
So, BabyChakra had a very different evolution again, of course,
Yeah.
right? So, that was a journey which the seed of the idea was planted many, many years back when I was a consultant at McKinsey. I was doing a lot of work in healthcare, specifically maternal and child health.
Yeah.
And it was an area I became obsessed with pretty much, Priyanka, like just putting it bluntly, right?
Yeah.
Because I was actually going on to, working with different partners, going down to like tier 2, tier 3, but equally villages, right? And more so villages, and figuring out and building out care ecosystems on the ground with mothers and Anganwadi workers and Asha workers and PHCs, right? And also fathers and mother-in-laws, because they are
Yes.
big influencers
Yes.
and decision makers in the whole journey of maternity
Yeah.
and healthy child outcomes, right? And I think what I realized then, it stayed with me, was that communities which are closely knit, communities of care which are closely knit, and where, expert care like doctors or, PHCs or ASHA workers actually come in at the right points
Yeah.
of intervention.
Absolutely.
Those children and those mothers turn out to be very healthy, very happy mothers and
Yes.
children.
Yes.
And that stayed with me. And I went on to Harvard for my business school. And that was in 2012. And I looked around, 2010 to 2012. And I looked around me, and there was a class full of amazing people from all over the world. And we were all talking tech and digital and product, right? And back in India, there was this whole sort of
Yeah.
evolution of products, digital products as well. But the more I talked, the more the question that came up is, why don't we have a digital solution to something as fundamental as parenting? As motherhood,
Yeah.
right? As raising
Yeah.
children. And that was really where the genesis or the seed of BabyChakra came about as an idea. So that's BabyChakra, right?
Yes.
Glam was more, I think, serendipitous. I was building out BabyChakra separately. We'd done this whole journey of content, community to commerce at a certain scale, extremely successful scale. And I met Darpan, who's my co-founder now. He was building out My Glam, a color cosmetics brand, right?
Okay.
And we met at the peak of COVID. We both had masks on when we were chatting with each other like this, but with masks on.
Yeah.
So we could make out if we were smiling or frowning. But to cut a long story short, the vision that we both kind of shared was that could we create a really large conglomerate, a platform, if you will, where you harness the power of content and creators and communities at scale and leverage part of it to commerce and do it across multiple segments, right? So mom and baby, color cosmetics, intimate hygiene, organic skincare, the works,
Yes.
right? And that's really where Glam as a seed and as like a concept germinated.
Oh, lovely, lovely story. And I'm just so happy to hear this, because I can very well relate with it. I remember when I became a mother myself and I moved back to India, I started working on my foundation as well. So because I kind of noticed the similar gap
Yeah.
of privileged people having access to medical services, information, all sort of things which you require, the resources you require during your motherhood journey. But there's a whole segment of people who do not have access to such tools and resources and information. So it became very rewarding for me to work alongside these women, provide them all sort of information. And I think the most basic thing which was missing was the education bit.
Yeah.
And that is what you have been trying to provide through BabyChakra as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and but Priyanka, just to build on that a little bit, right? The first time I became a mom with Arya, and I gave birth in probably one of the best hospitals in the city, right? But I had so much pain while breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Like physical pain, right? Probably more
Okay.
acute than labor pains for
Oh.
me, right? And even at that point in time, and I was building BabyChakra, Priyanka. It's not like I was like a noob. I mean, I knew stuff. But even at that point in time, I mean, just seeking and figuring out, okay, now I need a lactation consultant.
Yes.
Right? And having that expert come in and help me and understand latching,
Yeah.
understand how to heal my chafing nipples, right? All those
Yeah.
basic things was extremely helpful.
Absolutely.
So, while we talk about privilege, and I definitely will call out mine,
Yeah.
I do feel two things. One is that even in the most educated, most privileged segment of us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We still don't know
Absolutely.
parenting, right?
I
We're
can
still
so
learning,
relate with that.
right?
Yeah.
We're still learning, and I think the second thing is not to underestimate the confidence that actually, I don't know, somehow depletes through your body when you become a mother. For me, I was always second guessing even my own decisions with my own child.
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous, right? I was going through not severe, but some level of postpartum depression, right? So all of these changes, emotional, mental, even social,
Like how, yeah.
it requires a village.
Absolutely. And if you have someone who's easing this for you,
Yeah.
who's supporting you during this journey, that's very, very important.
Correct.
And if it's not a family member, it could be some agency or some sort of app, for example. Any little bit help is very crucial, I feel. But tell me a little bit more about, you've always been a working woman, right?
Yeah.
Then you became a mother.
Yeah.
And first time mom is, I know what you meant by it's really so many unknowns, and that makes you okay, how do I deal with this all? Was getting back to work constantly on your mind during that phase of your life?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
It always was. I never questioned it. No one who knew me well questioned it.
Yeah.
But there were people in my team who questioned it, some individuals.
Yeah.
And, it was also a function of, me perhaps also being very enthusiastic to prove people wrong.
Yes.
Which was very, how would I put it? Which was, I felt I put a lot of pressure on myself the first time around, right?
Yes.
So to give you an example, we were raising money when I
Yes.
had Arya, right? So 2 weeks after I gave birth, and I had a C-section both times, one of the investors who didn't know my situation told me that, why don't you come to Delhi to meet us?
Yeah.
And we're looking at investing, etc. And as this person who was trying to be overtly enthusiastic and basically not
Yeah.
also having that thing about saying that I will not
Miss this.
I will not miss this, right? I remember hobbling to the airport, hobbling through the airport, hobbling up the aircraft steps, every step, you know how it is after a
Yeah.
C-section, the
Yeah.
recovery, right?
Yeah.
Was excruciating pain.
Oh.
And I don't know why I was putting myself through it. I don't know what kind of a point I had to prove. I had to prove, right, Priyanka?
Yeah.
Of course, funny moments as well, where I was checking in my breast pump through security and the CISF officer looks at it and says, "Madam, ye kya hai?" And then he gave me a full judgment on "Ma'am, itne chote bacche ko aap ghar chhodkar aap kahan doodh pump karoge?
yes.
Aap वापस जाओ, इससे मुझे जाना है meeting के लिए." So all this happened, funny incidents and nice judgment, but
Everyone
in
is
a
full of advices as
well-meaning way.
well.
In a well-meaning
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
But I think I was really too much out to prove myself at that point in time. I think the second time around, Priyanka, I'm a lot more secure. I'm a lot more
Same.
confident.
Yes.
And,
And took it easy.
Yeah, and I have
On
nothing
yourself.
to prove. Exactly.
Yeah. Because a lot of women, especially the first time moms, they sometimes get very confused or even fear how to get back to work.
Yeah.
And my usual advice to them is don't rush into it, because, but again, sometimes it's a choice that you can come back to work or you do not wish to come back to work, but sometimes it's a necessity.
Yeah.
So you will have to get back to work.
Yeah.
What will be your advice to first-time moms on like how they should like get back to work but also prioritize their health and well-being and their child's well-being? Like, what should be the way around it?
So I think health and well-being come first, right?
Absolutely.
Yours and your baby's. And every body is different. And I
Yeah.
literally mean body is different.
Yes, yes.
Everybody's mind is different. And everybody's, social and sort of economic ecosystem is different, Priyanka.
Yeah.
Right? I actually tell a lot of people, interestingly enough, and I have a lot of entrepreneurs reach out to me talking about their own journeys and struggles with fertility and their aspirations on motherhood and when is a good time, etc. And I often say, counterintuitively, it might actually not be a bad idea to have a child later in life.
Yeah.
Because financially you're more secure. You can afford the care you need around having a baby.
Yeah.
And, it takes a village, like I said. So, and
Yeah.
most of us, and I've said this ad nauseum since 2015, that 70% of India lives in nuclear families. Guess what? So do we.
Yeah.
So you need care. And then, also the financial security that, okay, God forbid something happens on the job front, right? You still have the monies to keep you going as a unit.
Yeah.
Right? So I actually don't think it's a bad idea to have a child later in life, to be
Yeah.
honest. You've also more well established. Bouncing back is easier.
True.
Your presence is felt, right? And missed.
Yes.
So to cut a long story short, what do you need? You need support. You need a partner, and often I don't need, Sandeep and I are extremely equal. Like if I'm traveling today, well, guess what? He's at home, right?
Yeah.
We're always kind of trading off and calendaring our schedule such that one of us is always around the children. So you need money, you need partnership, and
Yeah.
you need social support.
And I think sometimes it's just not necessary to rush yourself. You can just take it
100%.
easy,
I don't know about that. I do
if possible.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting, it's a very important
Yeah.
point you make, Priyanka, because I think, when we say take it easy, it has different connotations for
Yeah.
people, right? And it's not easy. You know this, right? Being a new mom is not easy. I think the important thing is, I've said this on LinkedIn multiple times, and I've said this to other women as well. I use this term "dhimi aach," right? Which is that don't put your career out. Or don't put your entrepreneurial ambitions out, because
Yeah.
to light that fire, to kindle that fire, to get back into the groove of things is tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I've seen enough and more women struggle with it.
Yes.
If there is a possibility where you can keep things going on a lower flame, right?
Yeah.
Where you're not doing that hustle, that crazy routine that you did pre-baby,
Yeah.
If you can keep it going, then when the time is right, when you're feeling that, yes, I need to get back
Start
into it.
in full
just,
swing,
Yeah,
yeah.
just get back into it. It's easier to
Yeah.
amplify that fire than light it again from scratch.
Yeah.
So,
Well, why I say it, because I remember with my first one, I rushed into it. So right after 3 or 4 months, because I was a working mom.
Yeah.
I was working before she was born. And right after she was born, I started thinking about going back to work, because you start missing your workplace and your career and everything you've been building all these
Correct.
years. And I think at some point it was too much for me. And I wasn't really a happy mom, because I was just trying to rush into everything at the same time, be the perfect mom, perfect wife, perfect housemaker, perfect person at workplace. So it was just too much. Do you think that we are doing this to ourselves?
like I said, the first time around, I was putting so much pressure. Why did I have to prove? Who did I have to prove things
Yeah.
to? I don't know. Now in hindsight, right? I mean, that poor VC was probably watching me limp into his office and wondering why is this crazy woman here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who was I trying to prove what to, right? My commitment. I mean, I should know that I'm committed.
Absolutely.
By now I should know, right? So
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot of proving that we feel like we keep on needing to do. There's an interesting statistic to just that point. Indian women, and this is data, right? Indian women actually work the hardest in the world,
Yes.
number of hours in the world.
Undoubtedly.
At work, and that is
At
across
home.
all countries, and at home, Priyanka, and at home. So I think somewhere you're right. I hear you when you say be a little bit easy, take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I hear you there. And I'm waiting for a paradigm where, we have, and we've talked about this, right? We have lazy ladies. We're
Yeah.
all like, we can have the time to chill, to be ourselves, to just
Absolutely. And
do what
enjoy
we
that
want.
time with your baby.
And-
That's the
or
most
with yourself,
important thing.
Priyanka, or with yourself,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
like today in the flight, and I know I'm on a show with talking about motherhood, but on the flight, I was very happy. I had peace, I had quiet. I bought my copy of the Fortune magazine. I wrote a few thoughts. I was with myself.
Yeah.
And that's precious.
Traveling alone.
That's precious.
Yes.
You know?
I so hear you.
So,
Yeah, we need it every now and then. Absolutely. Why not? Because I noticed with my second one, I took it so easy. And I would say maybe because it was COVID time, so there was no other choice. We were at home. But I was really lazy with everything. And I could see
lovely.
that I was much happier. And my baby was much happier too.
how lovely.
So those 3 years, that was like the most amazing time I had with my children. And then I realized, like, what was I doing with the first one? And maybe I should have taken it a lot easier. But again, for some it's a choice, for some it is not, so
And Priyanka, remind me, did Maate come to mind after your second one?
first one.
After the first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where you feel all the pressure, right? Because
Yeah.
you're constantly trying to build something and prove yourself.
Yeah.
So I can relate with that. That happened with me. But a lot of women in India, I think about 50% of women, stop working right after they give birth. Do you think workplaces are responsible for that?
I mean, that's a conversation I can go on and on and on about. I mean, the data is terrible, to say the least. And-
Responsible as in, could that be a reason behind
I mean, there's
this?
so many factors. And absolutely. I mean, of course, workplaces are responsible, but I mean, it's so much. Okay, to kind of take a step back, right?
Absolutely.
My mom has been a working woman from the beginning. I've not
Yeah.
known her to be anybody. Like, she's been working outside of home for the longest time, right? And from when we were children. And she's told me this so many times. She's like, Naiyya, your generation has lesser women in the workforce than my generation
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And that is crazy. That is
Yes.
disturbing. And I'm not saying it's important. And, we talk about, the problem statement stems from even the fact that we give economic value to a certain kind of work. Work at home is work, right? But we don't attribute economic value to it. It's something as fundamental as that.
Yeah.
And the burden of home is taken up by women at home, right? But there's no economic value or societal value for that matter that's attributed to that, except for some
Absolutely.
platitudes on Mother's Day, right? So I think that's the starting point. Then you move on to like, okay, what is the societal ecosystem that basically supports this or like helps or can help with the transition?
True.
And the almost like the creating the gap or the bridge for the missing
Yeah.
middle, as I like to call it, right? You have the highest number of girls now graduating in STEM in the world from India.
Yeah.
But you have no leaders,
True.
right? In tech in India. Why? Women leaders, I'm talking about. Why? You have less than 8 to 10% of women in science and, and research.
Yeah.
Why? What happens? Because they fall out after motherhood.
Yes.
Or they fall out after marriage.
Yes.
So the whole societal eco-structure there, research organizations, workplaces, partner relationships, your spousal relationships, there's so much to unpack there. Yeah? I mean, honestly, Priyanka. And of course, to exacerbate the issue is the nuclear family, because then eventually it's a unit, right? A husband, wife, and the child. And there's no one else. Earlier, at least you had a community of support, right? There's no community. So if the husband's not stepping up to play his role, or the
Yeah.
partner is not stepping
Yeah.
up to play his or her role, who's going to play that role? Someone will have to take care of that living being in your house, right?
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
the woman.
But I also feel like workplaces are not really equipped, and at the same time are not really accepting the fact that this person has just become a mother and we need to be a part of her journey, because there's this constant pressure of working longer hours, working every day. We do not even have places open to working 2 times in a week or 3 times in a week. That concept is still not accepted. And if we have such possibilities, I think more women would be there in workforces.
I agree.
The flexible hours, basically.
I agree, but I also disagree a little bit, right? Because I do feel that there has been now a bit of a shift in corporate India. I'm not talking about startups. In corporate India, where there's a realization that, and of course there's legislation to the fact that you need childcare facilities or
Yeah.
access to childcare facilities,
Yeah.
so creches, etc., right? But I think where organizations and the whole DEI initiatives and then therefore HR, everybody struggles, is that you see extremely capable women
Yeah.
who drop out because, it's not just at the workplace you need support at home.
Absolutely.
If you're going to go back, if you're doing 2 jobs a day, basically, right? You're doing
Yeah.
a job at office, you're doing a job at home.
At home.
That's not fair.
No.
It's just not fair, and it's just not easy.
No, absolutely.
So that actually is a dichotomy I think a lot of corporates face today. I'm not speaking for all, but the ones who truly want to make that delta difference and are unable to because they're still losing women because at home they're going and doing second shift.
No, absolutely. Also the mindset. I feel the moment women want to come back to work or apply for a new job, and it is a mindset some people have, like they think, okay, she's a new mom, and then they really start doubting, will she be able to give enough to the company, contribute enough, and be present, most of the times when we need her. So that is also one of the reasons I feel people are more reluctant to offer job to new moms.
I think also, Priyanka, to be fair, like my paradigm has been very different, right? Because I've been able to create the ecosystem I want to be part
Absolutely.
of in my teams.
Yeah.
So it's different. But I mean,
Working for
absolutely.
somebody else
Yes,
and working
absolutely.
for
I think
yourself is a
corporates
completely different thing. Yeah.
You're right. I mean, research organizations, a little bit more flexible, but again, crazy hours, different. Consulting. I was in McKinsey earlier, right? As you know. So we talk a lot as alums of McKinsey about the work-life balance and the
Yeah.
lack of it thereof. And
Yeah.
even we talk about work-life integration, but it's actually work. So yeah, and travel.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Correct. So there are certain many contexts, and again, which is why I think being an entrepreneur is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You can work on your own terms. So I keep seeing your LinkedIn posts, and you talk a lot about balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship. And you also talk about a lot of women reaching out to you with the questions they have in their mind on how they can balance both sides of their lives. Tell me, what are the kind of questions you get and how you have helped and encouraged them to, continue with what they want to pursue further?
So I talk a lot about work-life integration, and I think why that's important is because, and that's my paradigm. It may work for
Yeah.
some, it may not work for some, right? But
Yeah.
I just share what
True.
comes authentically to me and what seems to work for me so far, right? And Priyanka, it's interesting because, and it's such a privilege, and you probably also obviously experience it when people reach out to you like seeking counsel or seeking thoughts or advice on their journeys. You just feel a very big sense of responsibility.
Yes,
But
yes.
I think broadly the themes of questions I get, like from a younger cohort,
Yeah.
would be stuff around egg freezing, would be stuff around fertility, around when to have a child, when to think about marriage, what
Yeah.
happens after marriage, what happens after having a child,
What is the right time to
what
have
is
a
the right
baby?
time
Yeah.
to have a baby, right? On to, how do I handle stuff at work?
Yeah.
I have, maybe a toxic work environment, or I have a chauvinistic, or a sexist colleague, or a boss, or a manager, or how to build my personal brand, onto how to start companies. So it's like a whole
Yeah.
plethora of subjects.
Yeah.
And what is really, really inspiring is I actually, through the course of some of these conversations, some of these are longitudinal conversations, right? So some of these women and men, you talk over a period of time, right?
Yeah.
And just to see how confident they become.
Yes.
It's amazing. And some of them are so sharp on what they want out of life as well.
True.
So clear.
So focused,
So
yeah.
clear. Like, I remember that age, probably we so much FOMO on things, right? So clear on what they don't want also.
Absolutely.
So
Which is so good.
Which is so good, Priyanka.
Yeah.
And so I'm super inspied by the generation
younger
that's
lot.
just
Yeah.
right like after us. Because they're gonna create history.
No, I have noticed that too. I think for us, when we were young and just starting off our careers, saying no was such a difficult thing
Yeah.
at workplaces.
Correct.
But now I see the younger ones coming in, and they're just so clear what they wish to do and they do not wish to do.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see that. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really nice for themselves.
Yeah. In McKinsey, we had this principle called obligation to dissent. And what that meant was when we were doing a project or if we were serving a client, right? And if we felt that something was not going the way it needed to go, or something was being actioned on that should not necessarily is not the right answer,
Yeah.
we actually had an obligation to dissent, right? And I think the cool thing is it actually is not a principle you need to evangelize or educate this coming generation on. They come in quite inbuilt with this obligation to decide, which I think is amazing.
It is.
But of course, I mean, on the flip side, there are still cases, and we saw an extremely tragic one like recently, right?
Yes,
With
yes.
a certain consulting firm, and it's tragic.
Such a sad news.
It's
Yes,
tragic. Like,
yes.
I mean, my heart, I was crying, Priyanka, when I read the
Yes.
letter her mother had written.
Yes.
So, I think it's like, it's a tough world to navigate. It's only going to get tougher. So I
Yeah.
think it's great in case the next generation actually grows up with like a lot of questioning and a lot of inquisitiveness and a lot of like challenging the norm.
Absolutely. You know, back in time when we were studying, and I don't know how it was like for you, but I remember most of the children were raised with a mindset like you're going to be a doctor or a teacher or an engineer. This startup and entrepreneurial journey was not really on your mind, you know, that you want to be an entrepreneur one day. It was not like all around you, or this is something that you wish to be at some point. But nowadays it's so different, and you're a mother of two young girls. How do you think the mindset is changing or shifting from that perspective of working for somebody else to working for yourself and building something on your own?
You know, I actually grew up in Calcutta, and Calcutta was very communist when I was growing up. So it wasn't just that like there was no awareness on business or startups.
Yeah.
It was actually considered a bad thing. It was considered a bad thing to be a business person, to be building a business, right? It was
Becoming
like
a doctor or engineer was a very prestigious thing.
very exactly, very
Yeah.
credible, like the right
Yeah.
profession to go after, right? So it was from that kind of a switch to basically where you're like thinking about business being bad, then going on to a McKinsey and a Harvard environment where it's capitalistic in nature and you know
Yeah.
it's actually an ideology.
Yeah.
Was an incredible sort of, I think, transition even in my journey of
Yes.
my aspirations, right? Now, where do I sort of see what is next on this front, right? I actually think it's an interesting time for entrepreneurship, and there's a reckoning of sorts that's coming up, right? Because suddenly, from anybody not even knowing what an entrepreneur is or this whole concept of startup, it's suddenly become very sexy. It's become very cool. Everybody's a startup entrepreneur. Everybody
Yes.
aspires to be one, right? Everybody wants to be having their name in the front page of different newspapers,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Everybody aspires to raise money. And, you know, I think the reality is that it's a very different personality type we're seeing play out in entrepreneurship. So kind of stepping back, the future forward for my girls, what do
Yes.
I aspire? I think two things, right? One is that there will be builders. I certainly hope they become builders, right? But there are also people who are creating the stacks for
Yeah.
these builders to thrive, right? And that is an extremely, extremely, extremely important skill. If you look at a Satya Nadella, right, the impact that he's been able to build with Microsoft
Yes.
over the last couple of years
Yes.
that he's been in charge, right? He's not a builder. He's built the stacks out to the next level, right? So
absolutely.
there is a lot of impact that can be created in corporate as well, which people seem to discount today given all the sexiness around startups.
Yes,
So
yes.
I would love for them to look at both parts and
Absolutely.
see what really speaks to them. And there's a third part, by the way, which I really want to talk about, which is the part of arts, which is the part of creativity. Which is the part of drama, right? The more, knowledge today is fungible. It's at our fingertips.
Yeah.
What is really not is the power of critical thinking of creativity.
True.
So if I want my children to stand a chance in the new future, and I think
Yes,
future forward,
yes.
I think the third stream is something I would love for them to
Absolutely.
really thrive in.
And I think the most beautiful time is that when I see my daughter really expressing her emotions
Yeah.
through art. That makes me happiest. Of course, doing her maths and science homework, that is part of the process. But when she does something about expressing herself through arts and creativity, that is something what makes me really, really happy. So I know what you mean by, something that they can feel free and creative and innovate without having to feel this pressure, constant pressure.
And also what will give them a distinct advantage in the future, right? Because I think everything else is going to be pretty much templatized and standardized, right? And you'll have we already have AI assistants pretty much
Yes.
kind of learning extremely in an agile and rapid
Yes.
way, right? So what's going to make humans stand out? It'll be this.
True.
So I think for them to stand out as human beings, to add value to the world and create impact, they will need to have this as an important part of who they are and what they create.
Yeah. But if I talk about the education bit,
Yeah.
I see most of the schools are still teaching in a very traditional way. However, we see there's so much technology involved now, and that AI is there. As you said, everything is there on your fingertips. Do you think the educational institutions are making enough changes in their way of teaching children, or should they be doing more changes?
The very fact that we're still sitting in classrooms means that a lot needs to be changed.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we're looking at an industrial era education system, which is being kind of incrementally repurposed to today's paradigm.
Yeah.
We're not thinking outside in, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, what's the world going to look like? What paradigm will our children play in, right? And working backwards from that to then create future forward education.
Yeah.
Methodologies and pedagogies, right?
Yeah.
It's not happening yet, Priyanka. There's a massive opportunity there.
Absolutely.
To really retrain the way we use our brains. Or the way we grew up using our brains, rather, right?
Yeah.
And really thinking differently for our children on what they need to be doing to really be ready for the future that's going to just hit them like a ton of bricks.
Should they be introducing a subject like, of course, leadership is something they've been learning, but leadership and entrepreneurship from a very young age at schools?
100%. I think a few schools have started doing it. More needs to be done. But also along with leadership and entrepreneurship, and that's a really important point, right? I think also a narrative shift. So, we talk about his story being history, right?
Yeah.
And if I look across the spectrum, all that our children are being taught are stories which come from a certain paradigm, right? An older paradigm. I'm wondering if there is again, like working backwards from 20 years, 25 years, right? And reimagining what education can be and what can they be taught, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a different paradigm on like a lens on gender, right?
Yes.
A lens on sexuality, a lens on culture,
Equality.
on equity and equality, right? A lens on, our relationship with, with robots and with AI that kind of forms our relationship with money, Priyanka.
Yeah.
No one is taught financial education.
Yes.
People don't know basic things like equity markets में invest करना है तो कैसे करे, SIP क्या होता है, mutual funds क्या होता है, no one knows.
Yeah.
There is so much to be changed about the way we look at
Absolutely.
education, Priyanka, and
Absolutely.
it's a burning platform.
And I'm very amazed to see that there's still very little which has been done towards this.
Yeah.
Very, very little, because the amount of fast pace we're moving with, we have to make similar changes, right, in our educational system and also in our household. One thing which I constantly struggle with is that most of our kids are now going to international schools. They've been taught about world problems, right, and world perspective. But sometimes it becomes very hard for me to bring them back to their roots and teach them about things which we learned, even like our own history, our own cultural perspectives towards life. How do you manage to do that all? Because it becomes a
very
big
tough.
responsibility of parents.
It's very tough. And, beautifully said, I think there's this whole piece around, of course, our, like what we consider our culture. But there's also the layers to this, right? Helping our children understand what it means to be from a financially disadvantaged family in India.
Yeah.
The privilege they come from, the privilege they experience day in, day out.
Yeah.
Right? Onto like the contours of the caste system. We live in places like Bombay and Delhi and, the urban metros where even in these metros, and bluntly speaking, right, Bombay actually has pockets of buildings where they will say, we don't want a diverse rental profile. And what does that mean? We do not want Muslims. We don't want people from backward castes.
Yeah.
We don't want, LGBTQIA residents.
Oh.
This is in Bombay we're talking about, Priyanka. And this is really the paradigm we all still live in.
Yeah.
Now, how do we all help our children understand that this is not an okay paradigm?
No.
This needs to
no.
change.
Yeah. You have to be more
there is
inclusive.
Yeah. And
more
at what
open,
age do you
yeah.
start telling them this, right? What age do you start explaining this to them? So there's so many layers to unpack, when you come back, and the super critical point you made, right? Which is that not everything is done at schools, right?
No.
Actually more learning at home.
Absolutely.
How do we unpack it for them as parents? I mean, parenting is the toughest job in the world.
If I come back to the motherhood side of our lives, a lot of times, it has happened that I have reached this breaking point. And then I really take a back seat and I think, do I really have to do it all? Should I stop this or this? Of course, being a mother is something you cannot stop and you don't want to stop. But should I stop working? I have had such points many times in my life, and I feel like, why am I doing this to myself? Have you experienced this, and how you kept yourself going?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the why, like you said, right? What I end up doing at times like this, and that happens with all of us, right? And I'm so glad you're calling it out and sharing it so bluntly. What I end up doing is I take a step back from everything at that point in time, and I retreat into myself, right? I take a flight. Or
a girl's trip.
Unfortunately, like that's the other, by the way, casualty of entrepreneurship that I experienced. I actually lost a lot of friends along the way.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of rebuilding those relationships again.
True.
I that's what I'm saying. I don't think so many people realize like the
amount of sacrifices and things
the amount of casualties that you have in your life because of this decision we've all made, right?
Yes, it's not easy.
It's not easy. But anyway, I think this whole sort of retreating into myself has then kind of helped me recalibrate a little bit my why, right? And honestly speaking, if it's not something that you feel today you have the insane level of motivation it requires for you to get out and continue doing it, then you need to start questioning your why.
Yeah.
Is the why compelling enough for you?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then take a call, because you know we have one life. It's not worth doing it in a way just where again
something you're not enjoying.
You're not enjoying, or where you don't feel you're creating the impact that your life can create.
Yeah.
So I think, take a step back is what works for me, Priyanka. Also take a few days off. Nothing changes.
True.
Stuff keeps moving. Take a few days off, recalibrate, reassess, and question your why.
Yeah.
And maybe come back stronger.
Yeah. There's still very little amount of women who are working in this country. And if you look around, the amount of talent we have, and especially women, but they do not have the right platform. They do not have the right people to guide them. But I'm sure you must be coming across a lot of startups who are enabling these women from villages, smaller cities to really, help them come forward and build something which they are capable of. What has been like your experience with that? And do you think we as a country need to do more towards that?
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think, Neha, for instance, from Jobs for Her, she's rebranded it recently, has done a fantastic job of getting women back into the workforce. There was another company, FlexiBees by Shreya, Aspire for Her by Madhura. So there's a lot of Abha runs Ladies Who Lead, fantastic companies run by fantastic people. Jombe does a lot of, I was talking to Suruchi on her webinar recently, fantastic work with building leadership capabilities in middle-level women and, like women who are aspiring to be leaders in their organizations. So a lot of amazing work happening.
Yeah.
But the need is so large.
Absolutely.
There's place for everybody to play and more to come. So, if you're looking at a birth cohort of 26 million, which is where India is at today, so 26 million babies born every year, and you're looking across 5 to 6 years, you're basically looking at an overall cohort of 130 million mothers, if I'm talking about like the 0 to 6 age group, right? And that's the age group where you see the maximum fallout.
Yes.
So literally, I mean, in some sense, my addressable population, and then of course you do the cuts, India 1, India 2, India 3, right? And you go after different problem statements. But that's 130 million women you can go after.
True.
Right?
True.
So I actually think that the opportunity is massive. But again, it's not just like one magic bullet. It requires like a lot more holistic of an intervention.
Yes. And also from not just the platform, but also from the family side, the support system they have around them. So there's a lot more involved in this. So as a working mom, of course, there's a lot more pressure on us because we're trying to juggle so many things. But do you think there's more pressure on kids as well if they have a working mom?
I think it's a great question. I actually think not. And I don't talk about this whole quantity time, because I think that's all constructs I don't really believe in. I think you have to spend quantity time with your kids. You
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no
Yeah.
question of quality. They will not confide in you. They will not, they will not have a relationship with you if you're not spending enough time with them.
And this is what you want to do.
This is what you want to do as well,
Yeah.
right? This is what they want to do as well. I think the difference is that, so to answer your question bluntly, right? I feel that there's not much pressure. There's lesser pressure because, it also helps the kids to grow up a little bit more independently.
Yeah.
Without having this constant supervision of a parent, or being constantly watched on or monitored in the activities by a parent at any given point in time.
Yeah.
At the same time, they do need that quantity time.
Yes.
And that's where, if you're not a single mother, which,
Yes.
is extremely tough, and I have the highest regards for single parents. If you have a partner in your life, that's where you kind of divide and conquer time. So
Yes.
whole and whole, you're basically getting quantity time with the quality you need with a child.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also have experienced situations, and no offense, it's a choice if you want to be a working mom or not, right? But maybe it's something I felt that moms who are not working, they're constantly with their kids, and moms who are working, they hardly get any time with kids. It happens a lot more times. Like this guilt which comes in, how to tackle that guilt. A lot of women have this.
I actually also think, again, it depends so much on circumstances. I'll give you an example, right? My mother-in-law is an amazing, amazing woman. And she's completely polar opposites to my mother.
Yeah.
My mother was in the civil services. She was an IAS officer. She gave IAS exams when she was pregnant with my sister. She was mocked at when she was entering the exam center, saying, "Kaise kaise log aa jate hain exam dene." All this has happened with her. My mother-in-law grew up in Udupi, extremely simple, lovely woman, gentle soul, right?
Oh, nice.
And she grew up, she got married into a joint family in Delhi, and she had to somehow take the burden of all the housework. All the housework would fall on her shoulders. She was cooking at any given point. She and her sister-in-law were cooking at any given point in time for 20, 25 people a day, 3-4 meals a day, right?
Wow.
Now, when we talk about, she was at home,
Yeah.
she had no time for her children. When she tells me about her biggest regret, she's like, "Naiyya, I couldn't spend any time with my husband and with
my
my
kids.
son and my daughter, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law."
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's so situational, honestly,
is, yeah.
Priyanka, and I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize different situations for different people.
True.
And this also really opened my eyes to scenarios such as this, right? So yeah, now coming back to mom guilt, she feels a lot of mom guilt. My mom feels none. So it's interesting.
It's also how you take it, right? And you have to
Yeah.
learn to kind of also appreciate yourself for
Yeah.
doing so much.
Yeah.
I think half the time we just forget to appreciate ourselves, and
Yeah.
that's very important.
I love that story you shared offline about your child. You want to share that, Priyanka? It's a beautiful story about Saraswati.
Yeah, I mean, these are the moments which make it all worth it. And children, they really see through everything, because even if they are not expressive enough, what they're going through or what they're feeling, because they're still very young, sometimes they end up saying things to you which you kind of feel like, wow, I never thought it that way. And that happened with me. I took my daughter to a temple, and there was goddess Saraswati, and she asked me, "Mama, which goddess is this?" And I told her, "This is goddess Saraswati, and she is the goddess of wisdom and talent." And then she just looked at me and she's like, "Oh, that's you, Mama." And I think that was just so rewarding. And I literally felt like, okay, it is all worth it.
And I love that story when you were recounting it offline to the team here.
Yeah.
I remember warm the cockles of my heart. And I was so happy to just hear it.
Yeah.
So I thought it merited being shared on your platform.
It's like, I think we have sparkles in our eyes when we talk about our children, right? That's something which just makes us so happy. So I love talking about my kids. I'm sure so do you.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because it's also a conscious effort now. So Sandeep and I,
Yeah.
we love chatting about our children.
Of course.
And then we can go on and on and on. And then we actually then stop and we talk about everything from tech to work to whatever else it is, like the future of humanity, on to everything. But again, then we do date nights. Again, it goes back to children. So then I think I think it's really important because of course it binds us together. At the same time, I think it's also important to remember that we're still the individuals we
Yes,
are before we were
yes,
parents,
yes.
right? we still have those aspirations. We're still learning about the world that we live in as we become parents as well, but equally like in our own
But it's
individual
very
pursuits.
hard. It's very hard.
It's very hard.
Everything comes back to children. But I know what you mean, because you end up just planning everything around kids, your future, your things you want to do today, tomorrow, your holidays, everything is just around kids.
Yeah,
it's
and
just
school calendars for sure.
School calendar. The amount of notifications and emails you get from schools these days, it's like so hard to keep
talk
up.
about that because do you also feel it's all mom group oriented? Like I feel that schools, again, the other paradigm shift we talk about, right? It's like, dear mom, I'll give you an example. Arya fell unwell one day and Sandeep wrote the letter to school saying that, sorry, ma'am, Arya won't be able to come to school today. And regards, and he always signs off as Mr. Rao and Miss Saggi, right? Always.
How nice.
And I sign off. So if he's writing the letter, he'll sign off Miss Saggi and Mr. Rao. If I'm writing the letter, I'll say Mr. Rao and Miss Saggi, right? So we do that. And they always write back saying, Mrs. Rao, we will miss Arya today. And I'm like, why? Like, why? Like, why couldn't it be the father who's writing in? So I think it's really interesting. I think there's so much of a shift that needs to happen in approaches, right, Priyanka?
No, absolutely, I think. But now I see a lot of parents are using both the last names for their children. I think that's also beautiful, like the mom's last name and the father's last name both coming together. It's a very personal choice, but why not, right? Why not? So it's something very impressive, I feel. So I have this community Q&A and where we receive questions from other moms, and I would like to ask you. So we have got a question from one of our listeners, Sapna. She's a working mother like you, and she asks, as a mompreneur, how do you handle moments of self-doubt when it comes to balancing motherhood and running a business? Do you have any strategies or routine that helps you stay grounded and confident in both roles?
It's an excellent question, Sapna. And, there are always periods, like however confident we may all look, there are always periods of self-doubt that we, and I generalize here, but I would speak, I think for most of us, that we go through. And, what I end up doing at that point in time is I, again, do that little bit of, like I step back a little bit. And I genuinely remember my younger self.
Yeah.
My younger self was a self that I know was very fearless, right? That would put herself out there and that would be curious, inquisitive, and not afraid of failing.
Yeah.
It gets actually tougher. The more you kind of think you're building from success to success, on this journey, the more you have to lose.
Yes.
So I think just going back to that paradigm of yourself when you actually had nothing to lose, that mental shift and that kind of going back in time to that feeling, that emotion, I think is extremely empowering.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. And that helps me. The second thing I do, of course, is I have a great partner in Sandeep.
Yes.
And in my lowest lows, I talk to him very frankly with a lot of candor. And he just listens. He replays that conversation back to me most times. And I realize how silly I'm being.
I think that is the most important thing when it comes to parenting and working, a supportive partner. That makes it so easy, and you have someone to turn to because you both are part of a family unit, right? You're building it together, be it your work or your kids. So having a supportive partner is a very crucial thing. And as you rightly said, like, so many moms who are single moms, it's commendable the kind of work they're doing in the job they're doing, raising their children at the same time working as well. But yeah, I relate with that.
Yeah, but I think, Priyanka, like the first piece is really important because, I want to reach that feeling of almost like liberation, if you will, where I actually don't, but I should not need anybody else to get me back to that feeling of I can do this.
Yes.
I can make this happen.
Yeah.
Not have doubts about myself. I should just be able to do that with the reserves I have in my mind, in my soul, and in my memories, right?
True.
That is the feeling I really aspire to.
True.
Where I need nobody else to tell me that.
No, indeed.
I can just do it myself.
True.
That's an aspiration I'm setting out for myself as well.
So now I think we had a wonderful chat around juggling and balancing, motherhood, entrepreneurship, but let's do some fun part now, fun segment. we call it, where I'm going to be asking you a few questions and then let's make it a rapid fire.
Okay, no pressure. Thank you.
Well, this one is, we call it founder or parent. And I'm going to give you some scenarios. And you have to tell me whether it is more like running a business or raising a child.
Okay.
Let's see how that goes. Are you ready?
No. But we'll try.
So, negotiating at bedtime, founder or parent?
Very harried parent. But founder in my child. Huh?
Yeah.
She is really a hustler and an entrepreneur. She knows how to wrangle her way
And how
to
to win
later.
it.
And how to win it.
Yeah.
She always gets the term sheet and the SHA signed before she goes to sleep.
Dealing with unpredictable crisis, founder or parent?
Both, no?
And I
mean,
think being a parent really prepares you.
Yeah, I mean,
And being a founder really prepares you as well.
I mean, I think nothing prepares you for, and God forbid, if there's really a crisis on both fronts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's emotionally
True.
gut-wrenching, but nothing really prepares you, but at least like there's like a muscle memory that kind of kicks in.
Yeah. Celebrating small wins, founder or parent?
Actually, you know, honestly, more founder.
Yeah.
I need to do better as a parent. And I think the reason for that is because long back, Sandeep and I made a decision that we wouldn't like necessarily celebrate the wins with Arya.
Yeah.
Raya's too small. She's smiling, that's a win. But I think what we said was we'll celebrate the effort
Yes.
that's going into an activity with her.
Yes.
And regardless of whether it's a win or a fail, we
Yes.
celebrate the effort.
Yes.
So I think the wins celebration has been honestly more founder.
Handling a meltdown, founder or parent?
Parent. I
Nobody's having a meltdown at office.
I mean, not
You?
so far. No, not me, no. No.
Well, multitasking like a pro, founder or parent?
I don't multitask. I typically do one thing at a time because I believe in the power of deep.
And that is also something we learn hard way, I feel.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's of course, like sometimes I'll multitask, but those are the times I find my outcomes extremely subpar. Bluntly speaking.
Yeah. I can
know.
relate with that. You're not good at anything anymore.
No,
it
and also
happens.
the mental load
yeah.
on me is too
Yeah.
much, no? Like, I mean, I really think it's unfair when we say, oh, women are great at multitasking. You know what? They shouldn't be. They shouldn't have to be.
No.
They should actually be doing what they need to do at that point in
And
time, like with
thinking
single-minded
straight
focus.
And simple.
Correct.
It's just so good.
Correct.
And
We
nice.
celebrate this culture of multitasking in women and we put additional pressure on ourselves.
True. So true. Constantly learning on the go, founder or parent?
Both.
Both. Balancing long-term strategy with day-to-day needs.
Both, no? I mean, I think, like, for instance, social, emotional, cognitive development for Arya, her nutrition, everything, right, is all like an investment into her long-term outcomes.
Absolutely.
How
A
healthy,
solid
happy,
future,
solid will she be as an adult or a preteen?
And same counts for your
for the
business.
ventures.
Yeah. Managing a tight budget.
Managing a tight budget. I think definitely founder. There's a reason the mom baby market in India is doing so well.
Yeah.
We are all funding it with our expenses on our children.
True. Giving out tough love.
So I actually do consequences, if you know what that is, Priyanka. Like I'll say this is a consequence of a certain action with Arya. But mainly I do believe in gentle parenting. I try to practice it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Very unsuccessfully many times, I must say, because it's tough to do it and get her to understand where that comes from, where the spirit of it comes from. On the founder side, tough love, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Things have to, we are here to serve.
True.
Our
And
communities
it's so
and consumers.
competitive. Everything around
It impacts
you.
everything.
You have to be on your toes.
We have to be on our toes. We have to play our A game.
True. Feeling like you have no idea what you're doing, but you're doing it anyway.
All the time.
More of a parent or a founder?
For both. I think parent, the second time around, it's a little bit easier with Raya. Little bit. But otherwise all the time.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining in this fun segment. So you have built two beautiful ventures and you have two beautiful children, and I'm just curious to know what is next. Is there something new you're working on or something coming your way? And I'm very curious to know.
So I won't talk about the ventures because I've shared enough about them publicly in other forums. I'll tell you what I'm excited about personally, right? I recently joined and was elected on the governing council of the Tech Entrepreneurs Association of Mumbai, which is a consortium of 60 unicorn founders. And we're talking about building Mumbai out as a ecosystem of innovation, tech, and tech talent.
Oh, nice.
And I'm quite obsessed with that role because for two reasons, right? It kind of, I started my journey as a person who was building a product company, a tech company, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of brought me back to my roots a little bit, and I'm really thoroughly loving the conversations there. And number two, the future is being unleashed in tech in a positive way, before our eyes, right? So it's an extremely exciting time to really be sitting on the forefront through the interactions I see as part of team.
Yeah.
Play out. For instance, now next month we have an NVIDIA summit happening in Bombay with Jensen himself coming down. We have a 2-day hackathon on the back of it.
Yeah.
I'm sort of helping the team create like the tracks on the hackathon. Put in like stuff that I'm really passionate about, safe cities, and a lot of stuff on culture.
Yeah.
So I think that's stuff that I'm really excited about building forward.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think the other piece is I've been an angel investor, Priyanka, as you know. So, I'm sort of seeing now the portfolio companies I invested in really thrive.
Oh, yes.
So I love the learning conversations I have with them. So I think these two things is what I'm looking to.
How exciting.
As like next steps from here.
Very exciting, I'm sure. I think it's been one of the best chats I ever had on this show. And I truly enjoyed it. Being a mom myself, and I think we have kids pretty much the same age, and being an entrepreneur, and we even work in the similar category. So it's been so insightful. Thank you so much for being here. And I truly cherish all the conversation we had today, and a lot of takeaways for me. And I have learned so much from you. I've been following your journey for such a long time. And of course, I'm going to keep coming back to you with more questions offline as well. So thank you once again for being here.
It's completely my pleasure, Priyanka. And likewise, by the way, full respect to you for what you built out. I think Maate is an extremely credible, very, very trusted brand in the space. And, we go back, and that was the aspiration with all the companies and the products we've been building out, right? The trust at scale. To do that and to do it in the time that you have.
It means a lot. Coming from you, it means a lot.
Kudos.
Thank you.
Kudos.
Thank you so much. And I have got something truly special, which I would like to give you and experience yourself for your children. And of course, I would love to have your feedback once you have experienced the products yourself. Here's a little hamper from Maate.
Thank you. Lovely, lovely chat, Priyanka.
Thank
so
you.
nice talking
Thank
to
you
you.
for making it possible.
No, it was my pleasure. It worked out so well. I was supposed to come to Delhi today, and it just worked out. When things are meant to work,
that is so true.
Something happens. I don't know.
So true. It happened. It works out.
Yeah.